think you know the people who are supposed to protect you until one night, one of them tells you something that shatters that illusion forever. What if the very person sworn to serve and protect made a confession so disturbing it kept you up at night? Well, that's exactly what happened. And trust me, by the time you hear what he said, you'll never look at police officers the same way again. It was a cold Friday night. The streetlights flickered like they were in a horror movie, and every shadow looked suspicious. I was driving home after a long shift at work, exhausted, barely keeping my eyes open, when I saw the flashing red and blue lights in my rearview mirror. My heart pounded, my hands gripped the wheel. A police officer pulling you over is never a good sign, especially at this hour. The officer walked up, tapped on my window. Typical routine, right? License and registration. But then he did something odd. He sighed deeply, like a man carrying a weight too heavy for his soul. And then he looked at me and said, "You ever feel like you're living a lie?" Uh, excuse me, officer? I thought you were going to tell me my tail light was out, not hit me with an existential crisis at 2 a.m. But he wasn't joking. His face was pale. His hands shook. He told me he needed to get something off his chest, and it had to be now. And what he said next still haunts me. He leaned in closer and whispered, "I arrested the wrong man last week." And I knew it. I felt my stomach drop. He went on, voice cracking, explaining how he followed orders, how the pressure to close cases forced him to look the other way. He was innocent, he muttered. I sent an innocent man to prison. And the worst part? He admitted this wasn't the first time it had happened. I sat there in stunned silence, feeling a mix of anger, confusion, and pity. How could someone live with that? And why was he telling me? Was this a cry for help, or was he just looking to unload his guilt onto a random stranger? So at this point, I'm wondering, do I comfort him, call internal affairs, or just slowly roll up my window and pretend I didn't hear anything? But here's where it gets even darker. He said something that made my skin crawl. I see their faces when I sleep, and I know one day one of them is coming back for me. And then, without another word, he just walked back to his cruiser and drove away. No ticket, no explanation, just gone, like a ghost, leaving me there questioning everything I thought I knew about justice. For days after that night, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I started researching cases of wrongful convictions and discovered just how common they were. People spending years, sometimes decades, behind bars for crimes they didn't commit, some never making it out. And the officers responsible? Many of them moving on with their lives, carrying their secrets like invisible scars. I started reaching out to people who had been affected by wrongful convictions, listening to their stories, hearing the pain in their voices. Families torn apart, lives ruined, dreams shattered. The deeper I dug, the worse it got. Some of these people never got their names cleared, forced to live under a shadow of guilt for something they didn't do. Others, once released, found it impossible to reintegrate into society. Jobs wouldn't hire them. Friends and family had moved on. They had lost everything. And yet, the justice system carried on, unaffected. Cases kept closing. Officers kept making arrests. The cycle continued. And the people behind bars? Just numbers in a system that rarely admitted its mistakes. What does it say about a system where the ones enforcing the law are haunted by their own actions? If they can't live with what they've done, how can society trust the process? The question that keeps me up at night is, how many more stories like this are out there, buried under legal paperwork and forgotten names? How many people are sitting in a prison cell right now for something they didn't do, while the real criminals walk free? And how many officers, just like the one I met that night, are tormented by their own conscience, knowing they played a role in it? So now I ask you, if the people enforcing the law can't live with the weight of their own actions, what does that say about the system itself? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more mind-blowing stories like this, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe out there. You never know who's carrying a secret.